Reiner says about the honorary consul in Mexico, nice guy, he knew the Corona Investigative Committee. He had probably also understood that getting the vaccine was not so good. Reiner quotes him as saying, damn, I got vaccinated. When Reiner told him that the passports had turned up again and the new application could be cancelled, he said on the phone, yes, I will. A few days later, however, he called and said that the old passports had already been invalidated and that they would have to come to Tijuana to pick them up. So Reiner said, so we left the dogs with friends and flew to Tijuana. When they arrived at the airport, several immigration officials were already waiting for them. Reiner and Inka were driven directly from the airport to the immigration office with blue lights flashing and accompanied by 6 immigration officers in plain clothes. No one could really say what was going on. Reiner and Inka were then separated. Reiner was flown from Tijuana to Mexico City, where he spent the night in what he called a dirty hole. Inka stayed in Tijuana for one night and was able to fly back to her place in Mexico the next morning. The migration officers apologized to both of them later on. I found that very important. I think several officers, even the honorary consul, apologized. And they all said, we don't know what's going on here. 2 migration officers then accompanied Reiner on the plane to Frankfurt. One of them spoke some English and said that the German government was paying for the flight for everyone involved. As well, very important. All of this is clear evidence that this was not a deportation, but a plot by the German government to kidnap Reiner Fuellmich from Mexico.
Yeah, and I think when he left, one of those immigration officers also shook his hand and he said, yes. I wish you the very best from the bottom of my heart or something.
Right.
Yeah, because he knew things were very odd.
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, Kerstin. We're doing another reporting on the case of Reiner Fuellmich, who's had his 43rd hearing, I think, on Friday, or maybe, 43rd. And we were not there. Kerstin Heusinger from Germany, who reports in French, and I, Djamila, who reports in Dutch and English. But we thought, because there were 3 hearings last week, we would give you a quick update on what happened. And this is our first Zoom recording, so welcome, Kerstin.
Thank you, Djamila, and good evening.
Good evening.
Let's see if it will be a short session. Let's see.
Yes, it will be difficult to keep it short and logical, because there were 2 days and during both those days, Reiner did his own plea. Katja Wormer, his lawyer, requested that he could do his own plea, which was an unusual request because Reiner has the possibility to have the last word. But this was an extra opportunity for him to, next to the plaidoyers, as it's called in German, of his lawyers, that he would do one for himself as well. Mm-hmm. And so the first day was we called it, well, we jokingly called it the A and the B movie days. Right. So on Monday, it was a really exceptionally well presented case. He mixed personal anecdotes, professional stories, references to law and articles, and it was a very strong and especially really well verbalized day, because everybody was hanging on his lips. I mean, even the guards were all in the room, right, just listening. And we had the feeling even the judges and the state prosecutor were sitting there. It was all silent, and he was just talking, and it was quite impressive. The next day, however, on Tuesday, was an entirely different day. So these were my impressions. I'll give the floor to you now, Kerstin.
Well, what was interesting for me with regards to what you just said, is that Reiner came in actually on Monday, and he really looked not well at all. Huh?
Yeah, he looked the worst.
He came in, and I was shocked.
Yeah, he was the worst he has been in terms
of. It was, right? Yes, he was totally pale and like fallen in, and he looked like sick. I mean, I think he was sick a few days before, at least a little bit, I don't know. But at the point that when he started talking, so when this little discussion, will it be allowed or will it not be allowed, that he could talk, when this was over and he started to talk, it was like a different person. And for me,
it
that
was like
was
he was energizing himself along the way, and he
totally
sort of lost his tiredness. Yeah.
And I mean, like a few minutes later, the Reiner Fuellmich that we know from its best times, his best times in the Corona Investigative Committee, was there again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well,
that was
even better. I mean, because in
even
the
better.
he was more reactive, but now it was such a story where he, of course, it was his own experiences. You know, he went into detail of what happened to him, so
Yeah.
it was all told from a perspective that we hadn't seen to such a detail. But yeah, it was remarkable. That first day, there was also the original public prosecutor, Jon, was there, and his entire plea was sort of aimed at the state prosecutor very directly, unless he was talking, when he was talking to the judges, then he was addressing them, like you, Herr Schindler, blah, 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 blah. So it was a very personal, very direct, and Reiner can be quite, how do you say it? Well, assertive is an understatement in court. But this time he was, well, it was sort of modest. You know, he was still very on the point, and he was very attacking the others, like, you know, you have harmed law, or you know, whatever, you have abused law. But it was presented in a professional manner. But the next day, it seemed to be the opposite, because he came in not so tired, or he didn't look as bad as the day before.
Exactly.
But his plea was not as polished or not as powerful.
No.
No. Okay.
Well, but maybe we start from the beginning. Huh?
Yeah, we start from day one, and he opened with a detailed account of his experiences in Mexico.
Right.
Yeah, do you want to say something? Was there anything new for you there?
Well, it was mostly, I mean, he really gave a very detailed description of how everything was going. And for me, I mean, we heard this several times, right, in other hearings, but it was never as detailed as that. And for me, it was like almost film scenes that you could see before yourselves, and it was like that. Okay, it was a really 3D version of this entire kidnapping scene.
Yes. What surprised me was that he said that the consul who trapped him, so to say, who was the one who said you should come to the airport, blah, 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 and then wasn't there, that he had actually met him before.
Yes.
And that they were friendly, and that this consul had said that he had been jabbed and that he had some problems, or
yes.
Huh?
Yeah, yes, that's right. So he understood. I mean, he was talking with Reiner about all these problems, and he knew as well the Corona Investigative Committee.
Yeah, and that Reiner advised him to do certain things to you know, detox or whatever, to get stuff out. So they already had a good relationship before those passports disappeared, and he had to contact him again to get new passports. And what was new for us both, I think, was the fact that when the passports surfaced again, and Reiner then wrote an email saying, actually, we don't need new passports. We've found our old ones. That it was fine for I thought the reaction had been immediately for, oh, no, we can't stop it anymore. But the consul had actually said, okay, we'll cancel the new request.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no problem. And then a couple of days later, he wrote back and said, oh, no, actually, we can't, and you have to come to Tijuana.
Yes, because the old ones have already been deleted. They are not in, how do you call that? They're not valuable anymore. So you really have to come.
Yeah, because otherwise, if you travel to another country, you might not be able to enter, because the old passports might not be valid, was the story. Whereas at the beginning, when he had said, please, can you cancel the new request, he had said that was fine.
Yes.
So he had initially not known about the plot to lure him somewhere, but obviously later had gotten this
It sounded like
instruction,
that,
which we
yes.
didn't know. We thought he was instructed from the beginning.
Yeah.
But there was this other guy called Knoploch or something
Oh,
who
yeah.
worked for the BKE, what's that again? The
It's
Bundes...
the Bundeskriminal, Bundeskriminal Office, the BKA, BKA actually, BKA in German. And yeah, he was working. I think he's located in Mexico,
Yeah.
and he's working for the German services, but he's there, right?
And in the emails exchange between him and the public prosecutor, Joan, there are these statements like, you have to lure him, you have to trap him, or whatever.
I mean, Reiner stated by doing that he wanted to explain why the entire deportation, the so-called deportation, was neither a deportation nor an extradition, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what he wanted to show by that, because there were these I think 3 specific words. They were lured to Tijuana. This was part of the emails. That's what the documents say. And the wording is as well that they are to be arrested. They are, so it speaks for itself, but because it's like an instruction, Reiner said.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there was a third point. And for Reiner, it is clearly a faked deportation by the German intelligence services.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And he mentioned the articles, like either you enter the country without a valid passport, or you re-enter the country, or you pretend you're Mexican, or you've done a crime. Right. And none of these things applied. Although I have found that in a law statement of 1996, it does say that the Mexican president can decide to expel someone without cause. So if it's inconvenient for Mexico, then the president can decide to expel someone or to deport someone. And so that has happened in this case, but it doesn't explain then why Germany paid for it all, if it was a deportation. So I mean, it doesn't change the fact that it was an extradition request without the due procedure of going through court in Mexico. And Anyway, so that was a very interesting anecdote, because it was from his point of view, how it went, blah, blah, blah. And then he went over to talk about the loans, the actual amounts of money which he's accused of embezzling, right? The Darlehens, they call them the Darlehensverträge, so the loans. And that was quite interesting, because he embedded it in his experiences with the Deutsche Bank when he was working for the Deutsche Bank, not as a lawyer, but as actually a banker. And when he was doing the cases for victims of a real estate scandal in Germany, the Schrottenimmobilien.
Schrottimmobilien, it's called in German, yes.
And what was interesting for me with this experience that he had with Deutsche Bank is that he said, well, it just made it clear for me that this Darlehen is it's used all the time. You know, through this court case, through this prosecution of Reiner, I had the feeling this was something very unusual and dodgy, because, you know, why else would he be prosecuted? But as Reiner described, the Deutsche Bank misuses the Darlehens to an enormous extent, but the principle is the same. You take money out of something, you keep it safe, and you pay it back after. I mean, the Deutsche Bank did it in an illegal way because they wanted to avoid paying taxes or whatever it was, or going above a certain limit that they were allowed. But this whole concept of taking money out to keep it safe and then to put it back is apparently a very normal thing.
Of course, yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so that for me that was new. And then with the Schrottenimmobilien, so the other case, he said, I think the Deutsche Bank abused them to such an extent that they would talk about Darlehensverträge when there was nothing on paper, even.
Well, yes, I think it was it the part when he explained in details at what point can you call a loan contract a loan contract?
Yeah.
Is it at the point that the contract is really finished with every detail and confirmed by both sides? Or is it at the moment when the money is sent?
Yeah.
And I think that was not very clear because the Deutsche Bank gave loans and they already took interests from the very moment they sent the money, but the loan contract was not yet valid.
No, and it could still be rejected.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And as opposed to the loan contracts that he made and Viviane Fischer made with Corona Ausschuss, they were signed. They were, there was a document and a signature of both parties and the bookkeeper.
Absolutely, yes.
But it was an interesting sort of lesson on Darlehens, how it is used in business and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah, or abuse as well in business. Yes. What was next?
Well, big question, because I have so many notes here that I'm still within the kidnapping here in my notes. But that's
you
why
can
I don't
add
find
anything you want. I mean, I'm just hopping through points here.
Yeah.
Because for me, the next point I have is that he then started pointing at the public prosecutor and accusing him of not having investigated anything. So he said it's up to the public prosecutor to prove that I've done something wrong, and yet he hasn't checked anything.
Yes.
In the dossier that he has made. I mean, there was a previous public prosecutor who had checked everything, who had seen all the sessions of Corona Ausschuss, who looked at the website, who'd looked at all the documents and contracts and everything, and had decided there is nothing here that I can see that justifies this being a criminal act.
Yes.
That everything that was promised to the people who gave money has been done. And it's not embezzlement. If it is anything at all, it is betrug. I don't know what that would be.
Betrayal.
Deception. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Deceiving the.
Yes.
But even that, I cannot not see any grounds for it, because they have done what they said on their website and their papers what they would do. They would make interviews and send them, on air, and that's what they
investigate on this entire topic, and even to a very, very deep extent, she said. I think,
yeah. And so then she forwarded it. I didn't know that. I thought somebody else up high had forwarded it to Berlin.
It was new for me as well.
Yeah. She had then forwarded the whole dossier to Berlin, because she said Corona Ausschuss is registered in Berlin, so actually it needs to go there. And then the public prosecutor in Berlin had said, yeah, but this entity has never been officially registered, so there's no
case.
There's no case.
Yeah.
So he had sent it back
to Göttingen. Huh? That's probably important to say that this first prosecutor, and this was, we're talking about June 22.
Yeah.
When Mrs. Reinecke, who's the senior public prosecutor in Göttingen, when she received it, she did everything that you just told. She sent it to Berlin. It was sent back from Berlin to Göttingen. And then she said, well, there is no criminal offense whatsoever, so we have to close that.
Yeah. And then she got it again in September. No, she received it again, and she had to look at it again. And then she said, I want to see my old notes or whatever.
But what is important to state in order for this not to be confused, that it was closed. The entire dossier was closed by her in June 22. And it was only 2 or 3 months later that the plaintiffs came up with this, how do you call this, with the plaint? The complaint?
Yeah, I don't know, the charge or the accusation.
The accusation. And only then, afterwards, Mrs. Reinecke got the dossier again. So this was again sent to her, but after the plaint. I think that's important, because it's maybe difficult to understand, no?
Well, I mean, so she got it on the 14th of June the first time, and then she got it on the 2nd of September the second time.
Later in September.
No, it's the 2nd of September. These two, Justus Hoffmann and Antonia Fischer,
Yeah.
gave it over to the state prosecutor.
To her again?
Yeah.
I
And
didn't
then
know that.
she said her last email then was for a month later, the 19th of October, where
Mhm,
she said, well, I need the old notes and old
mhm,
dossier to compare if there's anything changed that should change my opinion. She wanted
mhm.
to compare. And I don't think she ever got it, because then she was removed, or we don't really know what happened to her.
No.
And this new prosecutor, a young guy named Simon Philip Joon, I think,
Yeah.
he was then put into a position to, apparently with the specific task to prosecute Reiner, and he never checked. So she
Right.
also checked all the bank accounts that
Mhm,
that were involved in those 2 years of or that first period of Corona Ausschuss,
mhm.
and he just did the same check on bank accounts that were no longer existent or no longer running. So
Right.
did he check it, or did he just add the
Yeah,
old
he,
stuff? Yeah.
he rechecked it,
Okay.
but it did not, I mean, nothing came out because it was everything that he had already done.
Yeah.
And it was only checking these bank accounts. So he only repeated one small part of what she had already done.
Yeah.
And as far as I understood, Rainer, he never, how do you call it? He never investigated in anything else, right?
No, because there's one thing where Reiner has sworn something. He swore, I don't know on what topic, but he there is a statement from him
Yeah.
sworn under oath that something is the way, that he didn't have to keep it, um, that he didn't have to keep the money available at all times, something like that. But
Hmm.
Jorn accused him of that being a false statement, but even that he never checked. Reiner Fuellmich said then on that day, you should have then, if you believe that it was a false statement, you should have, accused me of it, or you should have
Hmm.
started a new or a different process or whatever, but you should have
Yeah.
done something with it. Yet you didn't do something with it. No, so it was just to illustrate how Joon hadn't done his work, that he
Right.
just taken a dossier, handed it in, and said he's
Yeah.
guilty. And he'd only taken the statements of Justus Hoffmann and Antonia Fischer, who were
Yes.
part of the Corona Ausschuss, as the proof of his embezzlement.
Right. And I mean, there was all this conversation going on, these phone calls and endless emails and calls between Mr. Yoon, so the prosecutor, and the plaintiffs, especially, I think, especially Antonia Fischer, but as well Justus Hoffmann. We never talk about Marcel Templin. I think he's not involved in this discussion, but the two of them had, I mean, I think Antonia Fischer said this herself when she was in court, that she had at least 30 phone calls with the state
Mm.
prosecutor, which is quite unusual that they work closely together like that, and there is no documentation whatsoever about this, right?
No, no.
We don't know what was going on there, or very little, maybe the emails, but we don't know anything about the phone calls.
Mm. Yeah. Um, Another thing that was new to me was that there apparently in the dossier is a email from Justus Hoffmann to this prosecutor Joon,
Yeah,
saying that we will tell you what happened to the money of Reiner Fuellmich's house that we took in a
we
week.
took.
Yeah, that we took in a week. We will tell you what happened to it.
Mhm.
And then, but that following email or that following message or whatever it was is not included in the file.
Right.
Yeah. That was new. I didn't know that email existed.
Yeah, and I mean, Rainer said this is as well this shows that part of the proving material is hidden.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there, I think it's not the only part which is not in the documents, but they only accepted a part of it, which is not classical. You usually have to have an entire
Mhm.
dossier with including all the documents which belong to the case.
Yeah.
But it's not like that in Reiner's case. We have holes. I
Yeah.
mean, hidden parts, and just don't show them.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think then he went on to, I just wanted to say something about that file, but now I can't remember. Anyway, he went on then to talk about the prison and the court sort of cooperating. You called it ping-ponging, or he said ping-ponging. I can't totally recall what that was about, but can you remember?
I don't remember the detail as well, but I mean, it's like if the court is not responsible, it's the prison, and if the prison is not responsible, it's the court. And
Yeah, it
but
had
I
to
don't
do with
remember.
abuse of law and abuse of power. So he had a couple of examples of what the court had done wrong and what the prison had done wrong.
Yeah,
And
right.
he
Yeah,
accused them of working together, and therefore you cannot pinpoint, because like you say, if you told the judge, but what about my conditions in the prison? You have to say something about it, and he would say, no, it's the prison's decision, authority, and then the prison would say, no, you have to go to the judge. So nobody could
right.
anyway.
Yeah, I think it's something about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said, I mean, that's maybe just a small detail, but Reiner described the heads of the Rostov prison as Norman and Bates, right? And he said, the psychos who run the institution. I mean, it seems very special. It's very special. Everything that he's telling about them is really, you can question it really. So
Yeah, he mentioned that another prisoner was deliberately placed in the prison to
right.
spy on him. And then once he sort of had an inkling about it, then this prisoner was placed elsewhere again, or
Right. The next day he was not there anymore.
yeah.
So I think he was supposed to collect some negative informations about Reiner. That's what I understood. And when he found out, poof, he was not there anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were already other co-prisoners with whom Reiner had some contact in one way or another, and they were sent elsewhere as well. So they always try to separate them. They don't want them to cooperate. They don't want Reiner to give advice as well to other prisoners as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was also new for me was that the former colleague of Reiner Fuellmich, this Katrien Behm, who worked in his office, in his practice, apparently when Reiner was still in Mexico, she noticed that there was a lot of police hanging around the office and knocked on the door to see if Reiner was there. And so she apparently knew this judge called Mook.
Yes.
Is there an arrest warrant or something for Reiner? Why, are you hanging around the whole time? And this judge then had said, no, not at all. When there was.
It was a lie, yes.
Yeah. And he was also the same judge that when Reiner landed in Frankfurt and he was then eventually heard by the first judge, Mook, that Mook just said, but I'm not interested in your side of the story.
Yes.
Yeah. So Reiner was then consequently never heard his side of the story, as he should have been, as according to German procedure, but he was never heard.
Yeah. That's not typical at all. Yes, it's not legal. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's for the JVA.
Well, there's another point. I don't think if this, I don't know if we are already. I don't think we mentioned that at some point Reiner said addressing to the judges, well, you have indeed accused us of not knowing anything about law, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
well, especially him, yeah.
Him, yes, of course. And then he clarified that he had taught law at university himself, and unlike various politicians, that he had an official doctorate. And I found that quite interesting as well and funny. He said that he also holds a Master of Law in the US, where the bar exam takes 3 days and 80% of the candidates fail. And then he said, and that was, I mean, part of these small sentences that he just says like that, and that sometimes make the public, that impresses the public or make us laugh sometimes. And he said, so I can't be a complete idiot, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was quite interesting hearing about his past as a lawyer.
Yes.
I mean, there were a lot of anecdotes in there as sort of woven into the story now and again.
Yeah, he talked about his career as a lawyer of consumer protection. And when he fought against the Deutsche Bank in several cases,
also,
and he said as well that the Deutsche Bank is called the bank of the criminals.
Yeah. But I didn't know that he'd done that also in America for small banks who were also the victim of Deutsche Bank. Well, it was so they were suffering under some whatever of Deutsche Bank, and then he fought for them there as well. Yeah. But anyway, it's a bit trivial, bit anecdotal, this. Okay, what was the next thing? That was the Wielandsheimer. He went on quite a bit of time about conflicting statements by a lawyer of Viviane Fischer. This was in 2023, where at first it was said that both of them were supposed to keep the money available, the loans available at all times, so that they could always pay.
Yeah.
But that would mean keeping them in accounts, and that was the whole purpose of the loans, is to not keep them in accounts so that the government couldn't confiscate the money.
Yes.
But that this lawyer of Viviane Fischer hadn't been consistent. So in one email he would say they had to have the money available, and then the next email he said, well, because he realized in the case of Viviane that wasn't true either. So then he said, yes, but Viviane's husband was always there to pay for her things. And then he made a final statement again, turning it around again, that they should have the money available in both accounts. But that was when Fuellmich was already in jail and he couldn't react to it.
I think so, yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a whole,
it was quite contradictory, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and that with the statement that Viviane's husband was covering her account because he had to admit that her account also wasn't always up to scratch. It didn't hold the amount necessarily that was put in.
Which is a nice way, a polite way, or a nice way to describe it, I guess, because she had stated in several emails that she had no money at all, even to pay her assurance, her sickness. How do you call that?
Her health insurance.
Health insurance, yes.
Mm. Yeah, and I think her account was also confiscated at one time because she couldn't pay her rent.
Yes.
But anyway, but then this lawyer of Viviane Fischer, instead of putting a statement from Viviane to prove his point, he'd added a statement from Reiner Fuellmich, which contradicted the point he was making in the letter, which was also very strange. And Reiner explained it as that the lawyer didn't know how to make these two ends meet because it made no sense. But so he just threw it in like that, like, you decide, I'm not saying anything.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And he actually should have been heard as a witness, right?
Yeah.
Him and Viviane Fischer should come back in order to do a testimony in front of the court, but the court refused that.
Yeah, well, Viviane Fischer was, of course, heard.
But way before.
Yeah. But Wielandsheimer, he was never heard, because that's the lawyer we're talking about.
Wielandsheimer, there was one day, a half of a day, where somebody was there that I did not join this session. I don't remember if it was him. Okay. Maybe it was him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they made several requests to hear them again afterwards, and the court refused.
Yeah. Yeah. And even Templin, who stole the money of the house. Yeah. Yeah, and then there was something like Wielandsheimer also said, well, the money that Viviane borrowed, even if it wasn't in the account, it was always covered by the husband, who had wertepapieren, so bonds, I guess, or papers of value. And then Reiner Fuellmich said, well, we don't even know if they were there at the time, because they were there, they were valuable until the end of 2022, but we don't know what happened after that. And there's apparently a video of Viviane Fischer and her husband having a shouting match about he's saying that he needs help because he doesn't have any money, and then Viviane Fischer saying, but you haven't had any money for a long time, which then contradicts that her husband would have been able to pay for the whatever.
That was never shown publicly, but publicly.
Publicly, yeah.
But I think Reiner mentioned it, though.
Yeah, so the video wasn't shown, but they had the
Yes.
transcript of the
Yes.
video.
Not really a transcript, but a report of it, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then there was the thing about the initial blackmail of Justus Hofmann and Antonia Fischer when they wanted to get out and they wanted to get money. They wanted half
Oh, yeah.
the money. What was that about? Why did he mention that?
Well, this is on my other many pages of notes. I think I have, it's difficult to find it exactly, but it was quite strange because you don't call this, how do you call this, the structure that they have built it in, that they were supposed to build in the beginning, the four of them, so Reiner Fuellmich, Viviane Fischer,
the company, the
company, right? Yeah. I was confused because I had the name society, but it's not a society. I think this is the French
foundation. They wanted to make a foundation, but it was never registered.
Yes. So this is as well why the state prosecutor in Berlin said there is no case because that does not exist.
Yeah.
And it was stated in this company that nobody would receive money for his work. Nobody. Yeah. So I think everybody brought in 125 euros. And in case somebody would leave, he would only get this 125 euros back and nothing more. Mm-hmm. But then at some point when they had very heavy struggles with and disputes with the two other lawyers, they stated, in order for us to leave this, to leave you and to accept to leave the entire company, you have to pay us half of the donation money, which at that time was several millions, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was going totally against the statutes of the company, absolutely, where the money should go to the investigations of truth, yeah, the revelation of truth.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say as well that both of them never really participated in the work.
Yeah.
Nor actively, not really. I mean, they were there in a few hearings of the Corona Investigative Committee in the very beginning, but they did not bring in a lot.
No, and I think that the deal with this blackmailing was that Justus Hofmann, they brought along another tax advisor who was very unpleasant, and they sort of said, you have to take this deal or otherwise we're going to give you a bad name or we're going to spread bad information about you.
Yeah.
But then Viviane and Reiner didn't, of course, take the deal.
They refused it. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. One other thing about this is getting a bit messy now, this presentation of ours. But
yes, there were so many informations. Yes.
This chief prosecutor, Reiniger, who initially said, I don't, who said, there is nothing here. I don't see a criminal deed. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about the emails sent to her by higher up, by the Staatsschutz or whatever it's called, was that the information should only remain between the state prosecutors and the Verfassungsschutz, secret services of Germany, that no other institution in Germany knew this information.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that was an other argument that Reiner said. This was, an order given by the intelligence services from the beginning. This whole thing about Viviane saying there's not enough money and the other two saying you should pay us, it wasn't from them. He says that it's all initiated by the intelligence.
A plot from the secret services, right?
And to prove his, or to argument this point that also Viviane's statements that there wasn't enough money, he said he didn't know it at the time, but she had a second account in which she had also had 93,000 euros transferred to, apart from the 100,000 she'd borrowed. She'd asked for another 93,000 which was in another account that he didn't know of.
Mhm.
Or no, it
And
wasn't for her personally, but she'd sort of parked it there. I don't know what. And that there was the gold that she didn't want to touch.
yes,
And that in the sort of current account that they were using, it wasn't a company account because they couldn't have a company account, but the current account that was in her name still also had 45,000 euros.
right.
So there was no
So there
shortage.
was a lot of money still there. Yes.
Yeah. So that was just for him to say, it just sounds like this was an order from the beginning, from higher up, and had nothing to do with these individual people, even though they did push for his prosecution.
Yeah. It sounds like that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, then I have just a small thing. Like, we know that Reiner watched Turkish television presented in English
Oh
in
yeah.
prison, because that's how people ask me, like, how does he keep up to date? And I told him, he watches television, but especially this Turkish thing, because that's where you still get some real information. But they've now stopped that channel. He cannot see it anymore. I don't know if it's just for him or that the whole prison has been gotten, but he.
As far as I understood, it was the prison, but I mean, it was an English-speaking Turkish television.
Yeah.
So probably the people who speak Turkish watch Turkish television.
Yeah.
But for Reiner, it was an opportunity because the Arabic television broadcasting is different from the German one, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably more true.
Well, yeah, they say things that some of ours don't, and the other way
Yes,
around too.
that's it. Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, the other thing, I don't know. The interesting thing was that he was looking all the time at Joon, the public prosecutor, and for once he was very uncomfortable, this Mr. Joon.
Oh yeah.
And he sort of had his back a bit towards the audience. He covered his face a bit until Reiner started talking about children abuse. Apparently, he's done prodeo cases for victims of child abuse. And there has been a case of a prosecutor in Hanover who apparently abused his son. And as Jona was transferred from Hanover to Göttingen to do this case of Reiner Fuellmich, Reiner addressed him and he said, one of your colleagues, cases like one of your colleagues in Hanover.
Yes.
And at that point, Jon got really angry, it seemed like. He really looked at Reiner as if he could jump on him and got all red. And that was a weird moment. Yeah.
I don't remember whether this was on Monday or of course it was on
Monday.
Monday because on Tuesday he was not there. Yes.
On Tuesday there was a different state prosecutor, a man, an older man. We haven't seen him before, so
yes.
we've had Joon, we had Reche, and then we've had these two girls that came, and we have this elderly man who was listening and taking a lot of notes, and
a few people of the observers of the case were asking themselves whether there was a kind of prosecutor tourism, just in order to get a glimpse of the Fuellmich case. So every now and then they will change, and everybody will have a little look, probably.
Maybe, yeah.
But maybe it was just Monday was just too much for Mr. Joon as well.
Could be. I mean, I asked this second day state prosecutor, and he said that he just had another appointment. But yeah, they can say anything, of course.
Right.
Yeah,
they won't tell us. Yeah.
Yes. The other thing was that on Tuesday we were expecting Christoph Niesere, so a second lawyer of Fuellmich, to speak or to do his bit of a plea, but he didn't come. But he came on Friday, and. You and I weren't there on Friday, and you know more about Friday than I do because I haven't caught up as much as you have.
Well, just a little bit. I just heard that he came. I mean, Friday was a short session of only 3 hours. The other days were 5 to 6 hours of Reiner talking, I think. And on Friday it was only 3, and it seems like Mr. Misery read an email or several emails that he received with threats in it, and it seems it was very, very weird and how do you call that?
Rude.
Vulgar.
Yeah, rude or vulgar.
Rude, very rude. Yes, very rude emails. And I just heard that he was reading one or two of them, and he stated that this was the reason why he had not come before, because it was quite a long time that we hadn't seen him.
Yeah.
I think the last time was probably in October or something like that of 24.
Could be. Yeah, I can't remember.
A very long time ago. And he said because of this threats in the emails, he had not come. But this was only a short part, as far as I know. Yeah. And then the rest of the time, Reiner continued with his pleas. And one special point, I don't know exactly, I think he talked a lot about the loans again, as far as I understood. But what was quite special on Friday was that there was a doctor from the south of Bavaria, Rolf Krohn, who was accused and persecuted just as Reiner, probably 1 or 2 years ago. And maybe he's still in the process. And he was there. He came all the way from the south of Bavaria. He did 700 kilometers one way to witness this hearing. And he was interviewed afterwards by Roger Bittel. And he said that it's exactly like my case. I see what's happening to Reiner. I hear what's going on, and it's just like my case.
Yeah, and he talked a little bit to Roger also about trauma, and he said, well, I also am traumatized because I think with him, the police invaded his house and with his children there.
Several times, yes.
Yeah. And two other things I thought were interesting. On the first day, Reiner had a sort of lecture again or explanation on the freedom of speech, or no, the extent to which a lawyer can have freedom of speech in court. Mm-hmm. And he said, especially lawyers, because they have to use words to defend their clients, and in my case, to defend myself, they have far more. They can say worse things than other people can, they can use foul language if they think that's useful for their case, or they can do whatever. So it was a sort of explanation to the judge, who keeps saying to him that he's not, he should behave or at least imply that he should. And then on the next day, he took it even further, and he said, I know that I am sometimes rude and I'm not pleasant in my words, but you do have to realize I'm imprisoned. This is my case. There's injustice done, and I'm really angry.
Yes.
And that was, I think, his best moment on the second day, where he sort of took a more abstract view of the whole thing. Mm-hmm.
Well, he was actually talking about his true feelings. He was talking about his anger, and then you saw, well, that's why he behaves like that. Yeah. And it was totally understandable in that moment.
And he was explaining that because of his dire conditions, especially now, they have loosened a little bit, but not mm-hmm. quite. And he said it's done deliberately. So either you cave in, you become apathic or whatever, you just don't care anymore, or you do care, but you just numb, or you become more and more aggressive. And the latter is what is happening to me. I'm just becoming more and more angry. But this is done deliberately. I know that. Yeah. Still, he couldn't help himself, or so. Well, I thought that was interesting too.
It was a very important point, I think. It was before the lunch break, actually. The presiding judge told him, Mr. Fuellmich, please don't call the plaintiffs losers. Yeah. That was very important. Please don't use these words. It would be better if you don't do that. So just like a father who tells his son, stop talking badly like that. And then we had the lunch break of like a little bit more than 1 hour. And after the break, Reiner came in and he wanted to explain this. Yeah. So I think this he was sitting with this during the lunch break, and then he expressed, well, but I'm not here as a lawyer. I'm here as an accused person. Yeah. And that's why I react like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Is there anything else we should say? I mean, you have tons of pages, so.
I have 30 more pages of details and sayings of Reiner. And I mean, there is so much. I think for us, I would say for me, the most important part of these days was to see the details. As I just said, the A movie and the B movie. Mm-hmm. But anyway, it was movies, and we saw more clearly how all this took place, and how Reiner proved in a very professional way, anyway, why this is fabricated accusations. Why this has to be fabricated accusations, and that the entire loan story, even whether there are parts of it are true or not, it cannot be the only reason. It can absolutely not be the only reason, and he explained it so very, very well. Mm. Why this is really a political prosecution.
Yeah, and he went into how the original. We should have looked it up what the word is, but the original accusation, how it was worded, was that the so-called the darlehensverträge,
the loan contract,
that there was something wrong with them, or something like that.
Oh yes. In the very beginning, in the accusation, it was written they were illegal loan contracts.
Yeah, they were illegal
because they did not know, and he talked about this as well. Said, well, you should have known that, but you didn't. It was Antonia Fischer and Justus Hoffmann and the state prosecutor who was not aware of the fact that every member of the company was able to do any business decision by himself.
I think it was something else. So the first accusation was that he had embezzled the money. That he had. It was embezzlement. That was the first claim. That is written down. And then, because then they produced the contracts, and it turned out to be loans, that then the judge himself said, okay, all right, then they're contract, but they're fake contracts. They're fake loans. They're not officially loans.
But that was months later. But
the point was that the judge himself volunteered to change the accusation, whereas the judge only has to look at what he is accused of. Does this hold? Is it embezzlement? No, it isn't embezzlement, because there were contracts, and so the judge decided, yeah, but the contracts are fake. They're fake contracts. Then it turns out that didn't hold either, because they didn't even have to have contracts because the company didn't exist. And then he sort of made it into, but you weren't going to pay it back anyway. And I think I understood, at least, but maybe I'm wrong.
I did not understand it like that. I never heard that in that way. I don't know.
Yeah, because he said, well, first it was this, and then it was that, and then you change it into that. And you as a judge are not supposed to accuse me. That's what his point was. You're supposed to check whether the accusation holds, but not to change the accusation.
Yeah, he changed the facts. Actually, that's what Reiner said. They changed the facts.
Yeah,
because in the plaint, you call it in the complaint, the reasons why he was accused did not hold.
Yeah,
in the first weeks or months of the hearings, everything was proven wrong. So which showed as well that the prosecutor did not investigate. Mm-hmm. Because if he had investigated even a little, he would have seen that this is stupid.
Yeah.
The accusation was just wrong. Yeah. And then that they said, that's not valid anymore, so we changed the facts. Mm-hmm. And they did this at least 3 times. That's what you just said. Huh? Yeah. For me, the reasons were a little bit different, so according to my understanding, but the fact that they changed the facts.
Yeah. You don't know.
Yeah, it was about for me, it was really in the beginning, they did not knew that every member of this company was able to decide by himself. So if Reiner Fuellmich or Viviane Fischer had decided, well, we pay for a translator, probably we will pay 5,000 euros, then they did not need to ask anybody else.
Yeah.
So they could have decided to do the loan contracts by themselves.
Yeah.
And everything is anyway it is stated. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, they thought that this was not the case.
Yeah. Yeah, because Antonia Fischer, she, I think, had said to Jon, the prosecutor, that the company had been registered. but he had never checked
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and then he had a quite a big thing about the judges, about their abuse of power, and but I think we mentioned
Yes.
that already,
Hmm.
and holding them responsible and saying that they could be prosecuted if this, um, he's always going on the counterattack.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And I mean, he was mentioning as well several times that the Göttingen prosecutors or the Göttingen justice in general has a very special reputation, right? Even until the USA, because it seems there was an article in the New York Times talking about the dark justice of Göttingen.
Yeah.
I have written it. I have noted it somewhere what it was all about, but
I think he was talking about freedom of speech and that is especially limited in Göttingen, and that there was a secret police.
yes, it was about the secret police. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you understand that better than I do, but
I think there was something like a police who was pretending to be a part of the Reichsbürger movement. So
yeah, the
well,
autonomous people. Yeah.
yes, of course, yeah, and so they really played dark games in order to accuse political opponents
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Probably some point that we should mention was especially on Monday, Reiner was mentioning all over again the topic fight for justice. And he cited I don't know if fight for justice, was it a quote from a book or a title of a book or something like that?
I think it was a statement from Schünemann, uh,
Oh, yeah.
the book of Schünemann, a famous law professor or
Yes.
whatever, who and this was to support his claim about the
Yeah.
yeah, the freedom lawyers have in court to say what they want, and so this freedom of speech is your right to fight. That's the only way
Yeah.
in court you can fight for your right, and so therefore that instrument, that weapon, speech, has to be used to without limits.
Yeah.
I think that's more or less what he sort of, if I understood it
Yeah.
correctly.
That's it. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And then he said something about empfindliche Freiheitsstrafe. Can you remember?
Yeah, a sensitive prison
Imprisonment. So
imprisonment.
yeah, that
But
they
what
want
is
to punish him, to give him
they
a real
want to
blow. And he mentioned they want to lock me up for 8,000 years or 80,000 years.
80,000. The next time it was even 8,000 million.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they over and over mentioned this when Katja Werner made a request for Reiner to participate in his well, he's a candidate for the federal elections in Germany, which take place tomorrow on the 23rd. And Reiner is a candidate officially in Wuppertal. And Katja Werner did a request so that he could participate in his own, how do you call that?
That he could campaign, that he could talk
Campaign,
to the
in his
media.
campaign, right. And they refused it because they said the risk of him fleeing is so high because he's waiting for this really heavy
Punishment.
prison punishment. Right, that's the word, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why they said, well, I'm waiting for, they want me to be in jail for 80,000 years or even more.
Yeah, but also asking for more time to speak with his campaign workers,
Yeah.
the people who volunteer. They ask for more hours so that, out of apart from the 3 hours that he gets every month, they
Yes.
wanted to have some more so that the people who manage his campaign could talk to him and negotiate, liaise and decide what to do next.
Yes.
And the prison refused that on the grounds that they didn't have the capacity to have people looking over these meetings or
Yeah.
So yeah.
When
will the election results be known? Is it on the 25th or when do you think?
Usually it's the same evening, no?
I don't know. I don't know how it works in Germany.
I think it's more or less the same evening. It's the offices close at 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, and I think a few hours later we should have first results.
Okay.
Usually doesn't take days in Germany. Probably the next day. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, the amount of people in the audience is diminishing. You can see that people are getting tired, and I mean, we've been I haven't been, but everybody has been going for a year now. And like last week, what we're reporting on is 3 sessions, 3 hearings in 1 week. So it is really intense.
It's intense, yes.
And you can see people are getting tired. The lawyers are getting tired. Reiner is obviously getting very tired. And it's like talking to brick walls, because whatever the arguments are mentioned in the court, it's clear that the judges, their mind is already made up. They already have the verdict.
That's very obvious. I mean, you see this in the way they keep their mouths, right? And especially the presiding judge is really only watching Reiner from like one angle of his eyes and going back, and it really seems like, I mean, it's a pity that we can't film that, right?
Yeah.
This entire session, because it would be great to hear Reiner speaking, to defending justice. That's what he said. Justice is more important than anything else to me, even more important than money. And you have this wall faces, but we can only report about that. I mean, we can draw it, we can take a few photos in the beginning, and we can talk about it, but
on Monday, it was very clear that the 2 lay judges were very captivated, because they were really leaning, it was for the first time that they were really listening. And apart from the scribe, who fell asleep twice.
Yes.
She was sitting there, and you could just see her go.
Yeah.
But she doesn't have to write anything. She just sits there too, because Reiner did mention that that's the difference between Germany and America, that in America, scribes have to write all the time to keep up.
Everything is noted, right?
Yeah. And in Germany, you just have the sort of statements, and
the official
only if the judge says this needs to be added, then he adds it. Yeah, so that was that. Well, as usual, Bittel TV will report on it every Sunday, and he was there on Friday as well. He did some live tweets. And Claudia, I can't pronounce her last name. Jaworski. She makes good reports in German as well. She does interviews, so if you want to see more of the days and
she sometimes translates them as well, right?
Oh, does she? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think unless you have pressing other things.
No, it's okay. I think it's okay. It was quite long, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, we just told, we have pages and pages more, but I think the main topics were
there are a lot of little details, and you wrote down a lot of quotes, I think, that Reiner said.
Yes.
Do you want to end with one, or?
Oof, I have to find it. So end with one. Probably, what did I note there?
He was talking about Carrie Mullis.
Oh, yes.
The founder of the PCR test, or the inventor of the PCR test, and you better tell it.
Well, he had them. He said that he had him once on the phone. I mean, Carrie Mullis died. Didn't he die in 2019 or something like that?
Yeah, so it must have been.
I think so. So he must have been in contact with him before.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I had him on the phone, a nice guy, a surfer, right?
Yeah, well, he was talking really fast, and he was talking about Carrie Mullis, and then he was saying, he's a surfer, really nice guy. And then he went on,
That's right.
It was sort of a strange outburst. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he said that Carrie Mullis already stated at the time that Fauci is a criminal, I think, something like that, no?
Yeah.
And that the PCR test should only be used for scientific use, but not in order to state an infection, I guess.
For diagnostic use, yeah.
For diagnostic uses, yeah.
All right. That was it.
I think so, yeah, that was it.
All right. We apologize for this very messy roundabout reporting, but at least it's something, and it's been a long time since we've done it, so we thought we must do it now. Kerstin, you will be there next week, right? Yeah.
On Wednesday, yeah. It continues on Wednesday, yes. The 26th.
The 26th on Wednesday, and then we'll see each other. We'll both be there in March again. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you very much, Djamila.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.